Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm talking about the new Wicked adaptation, the Wicked film adaptation that is based off of the Broadway show of the same name. This film is directed by John M. Chu, who did Crazy Rich Asians and G.I. Joe Retaliation. So obviously he's kind of an up and coming director still. So he managed to land this huge Wicked film, and it's going to be a two-parter. So it's just the first half of the Broadway show covered in this film adaptation, and we're supposedly getting Wicked Part 2 next year, also around the Thanksgiving season, just like how this film was released. But in this film, though, you guys, similar to the Broadway show, we follow two witches who live in the land of Oz, a good witch named Glinda and a bad witch named Elphaba. And as most of you know, Elphaba eventually becomes the Wicked Witch of the West. But the story mostly focuses on their time at a university where they're still students, they're still kind of learning their craft, they're still trying to figure out how their skill set's going to be applied to the land of Oz once they, graduate and get their college degrees and all that good stuff. And another problem that they run into while they're in school is there's a lot of animal rights problems going on in the land of Oz. So they have a professor that's a goat. They have, other characters that are other animals that are also a part of the university that are having their rights taken away. And so Elphaba and Glinda are trying to help resolve the problem. They're trying to, reach out to the Wizard of Oz himself to hopefully resolve the issue as well. And things start to look up for Elphaba as well because she is treated so badly with her green skin condition that she's born into as a child that you learn about early on in the movie. And so obviously she already has roadblocks that she's working over her entire life. She also has a sister who is handicapped in a wheelchair. So her whole life she's had all these issues that she's had to work around. And over the course of this film too, Elphaba gets invited to see the wizard himself. It gets a personal invitation. And so she and Glinda are hoping that with the wizard having so much power, he's able to stop all this really terrible animal rights stuff that gets taken away from all the animals in the land. And while this is going on, Elphaba also is realizing that some of her witchcraft abilities is also stronger than many others, as there's this book that has special sayings that have to be said in order for curses to start. And Elphaba manages to basically get this book going, since the wizard himself, as well as other characters in the Oz world, are having a hard time um, making sure that these curses happen or don't happen, or however they decide to perceive them. And so over the course of this film, Elphaba also gets framed for this huge bad curse that occurs, and she also has to find a way out of this curse that she herself found a way to be a part of. But overall, guys, I really enjoyed Wicked a lot. It was a very well-made movie. I was very surprised at just how great the production design was. I also liked how they did try to incorporate, though I'm sure the Wicked show, the Broadway show, does the same thing, of connecting to the overall Wizard of Oz story, how it connects to that story with characters that we see in that film, whether it is Glinda or Elphaba or the Wicked Witch of the West, as we eventually call her. How the flying monkeys came to be, how the Yellow Brick Road came to be. So all this stuff that connects the Wizard of Oz world overall, while also having great musical numbers, other great characters that we get to follow and get introduced to. And just the way this university looks was just fantastic in this movie. It just really looked great. I liked how CGI was very much used as a tool to enhance some of these practical sets that were built for this film. There's a real train that was built for this film for the scenes where they are out to go see the wizard and stuff. So it's just a great looking movie. It's such a great production, and I just love the passion and energy that went into this project. So if overall for my positives and negatives for this film, like I said, I think my biggest praise for this film is the production design. It really is masterfully well done. It really looks great. There's cycling bookcases in this one sequence, this one musical number. There's just the way the university feels. It just feels huge and big. Every room that you enter within this place feels like its own little kingdom. Even the way that Glinda and Elphaba's room in this university when they become roommates, even how that looks fantastic too. It's just a wonderful production design that I really think that we saw quite a bit of back in the golden age of cinema, and I'm glad they're trying to, at least in this film anyway, try to bring that quality back to how to do a production design in a film. It really does look wonderful. I also thought the sense of energy and passion of this film was quite amazing. The film is always doing something, it's always on its feet, it always has energy, it always has passion. The musical numbers, we follow the characters around. It's easy to see where our eye has to be when certain characters are entering a room and going from one place to another in a musical sequence. And just the way that the performers have energy and passion for this material is just very admirable for a film like this. Also, Jeff Goldblum plays the Wizard of Oz himself in here. Very fun take on the character. Definitely gets to add a lot of his Jeff Goldblum isms. I like his sense of invention. I like his sense of creativity. I also like kind of how the way we met the wizard in that original movie from the 30s. Um, how the wizard is always trying to find a way to improve the world that he's in. He's always trying to find ways for characters to feel better about themselves. He's always about with the Yellow Brick Road, trying to find ways so people would have an easier time finding him if they ever really need a real bad problem resolved. Just a very fun take on the character. And he even kind of has one of the better sequences that he gets involved in this movie where he's showing Elphaba, what exactly his sense of invention can do for Oz and stuff. And it's just a very wonderful sequence, and it almost kind of feels like something we would have saw in like Fantasia or something. It really just feels magical and unique and different. And I just love the way that Jeff Goldblum played this character, and I really hope we get more of him in the second film. And like I mentioned earlier, the film does connect to The Wizard of Oz, and it does it in a very unique way, whether it's how the Yellow Brick Road became the Yellow Brick Road, or how the flying monkeys became to be, or how, what exactly was going on when Dorothy got here, what were some problems that maybe were going on behind the scenes that that first Wizard of Oz films didn't quite cover because of the journey that Dorothy was on by the time that she got to Oz. So I just like how the film has such a grand sense of several things going on. There's Dorothy's adventure. There's stuff going on with Glinda, stuff going on with Elphaba, stuff going on with the wizard, and it balances in just a way where it doesn't feel overstuffed. It does feel like it's all coming together in the way that it should. It does feel like it's good world building the way that building lore in a story like this should occur and how it should happen. And also, I thought Glinda and Elphaba's bond and friendship was very strong over this movie. I really like the contrast of their differences. I like how Elphaba is more independent. Glinda is more relying on friends, relying on success, relying on this, money that her family already has for her. And I do like how Elphaba is carving her own path, really kind of doing everything herself, while also making sure that Glinda gets opportunities too, along with her. So I like their bond and their friendship. I like how their unlikelihood became basically the bond that they both needed. One can't survive without the other, and I like how the film does make that point that certain aspects of their personalities and their skills aren't quite met without the other person present. And I like how the film does keep making that point throughout the film too. The film also has a lot of messages about accepting our differences and about animal rights, and I think both are effective, very effective here, especially with the accepting differences message, where Elphaba is trying to fit in, and we're trying to help her find her skill set, and just the way that she's still going forward, and the way that she's given this problem, but is still going through, is that still trying to find her path, still trying to find the skill set that'll better Oz in the end. And it's just a very admirable effort on her end, and it's just a very admirable film overall to watch. But for my negatives of Wicked, why it might not be the number one best film of the year, but still a very great one. But there are some negatives along the way with it, and I think my first one is this film does have a very long runtime. It does. I think it clocks in at about 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I think a good solid 20 minutes could have been trimmed out. I think some of it really could have been saved for part two. The friend I saw this with had saw the Broadway show years ago, and he said that clearly there's material that they still have to cover for part two, But obviously, if they kind of balanced everything a little bit more, I think saving some of this material for part two, as well as the material they still got to cover, I think would have been the best way to go. I kind of agree personally as well. I think of about 20 minutes shorter for the runtime, I think would have benefited this film overall because the runtime does feel very heavy here. And I think overall, if they took out about 20 minutes or so, I think the film would have had a more smoother runtime overall too. I also didn't really quite understand the majors and studies that people can learn in Oz, because there is so many scenarios that Glinda and Elphaba get thrown into over the course of this film. The university is never really clear as to what certain characters can major in, what their study could be. Because when I first saw like the first Harry Potter, I at least had a idea in mind of what each wizarding student could pursue depending on how their school time played out and how their the subjects that they learn the best and the subjects that maybe don't quite appeal to them as much. This time around with this film, I felt like I didn't quite understand what some of the majors could be. I don't know what certain studies could be because outside of really just history and spells, they really don't quite clarify what other kind of subjects these students can learn in this university. So I thought that aspect of the story could have been better handled. Hopefully, part two can clarify that a little bit more with whatever the story goes next with these characters. But I did feel like the overall, some of the lore regarding this university that they're attending could have been more clear as to what exactly the characters of Oz can study in this university overall. I also thought, even though it did have quite a few clever connections to Wizard of Oz, I thought the film could have had a little bit more of them because I do like the idea of adapting the Broadway show while also trying to connect to that original movie because clearly this is trying to be in the same universe as that original Wizard of Oz film was. So I wish more connections to Wizard of Oz could have happened and could have occurred because they are kind of few and far between when we get them. And I feel like even more connections would have made the film an even more exciting experience as well. And overall, too, I thought more time could have been spent on Elphaba's childhood because there's a lot of sequences where she's explaining what happened. She's explaining how her sister became handicapped and all this other stuff. And it's really just a brief little snippet we get of her childhood at the beginning of the fact that she was picked on and stuff like that. And it's just more exciting as an audience member, whether it is a play or a movie, where we get to see some of that stuff play out visually rather than just a character explaining how certain aspects of their past played out. But overall, guys, I'm going to give Wicked a 9 out of 10. It's a wonderful movie. I really can't wait for part two next year. Like I said, the production design in and of itself is worth buying a ticket for to see this movie. But like I said, it does have a little bit of a long run time. Some of the aspects of the university could have been explained a little bit better. More connections to the Wizard of Oz I felt could have taken place. And more time could have been spent, I think, on Elphaba's childhood rather than seeing characters explain it over the course of this film. But 9 out of 10 for me. It's a wonderful film. I really can't wait for part two. I'm hoping it's a great experience like this film was. So be sure to see Wicked. It's a 9 out of 10 for me.